Welcome to the Driving Change podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network, where we live at the intersection of neuroscience and storytelling. If you love great stories and you love understanding the mindset it takes to be a world-class change agent, then join us as our fascinating guests from all walks of life unpack their unique journeys of perseverance and passion, of expertise and experience, and be inspired to use your own story to drive change. Well, welcome back to the Driving Change podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield, as usual. How many of you have ever dreamed as a kid of growing up to be a rock star? I mean, many of us love music, right? We grow up with these idols we look at, these musicians, and we see them on stage and we see them doing their thing. And we thought, man, how much fun would that be? Well, what if you were able to go and dive into literally the life story of a world-traveling rock star, and then the lessons that this rock star has learned over his lifetime that he's going to let you in on today, that it may have some relevance to you. Well, Cyndi Gennaro is that rock star. Cyndi was born and raised in New York City. Now he lives in Nashville, but through his career, he's been able to travel the world as a rock and roll drummer. He has had top 10 singles. He's played with people like Cyndi, Lauper, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. I do love rock and roll, as Joan would say. Bo Diddley, Johnny Winter, the Monkees, Jolyn Turner, Michael Bolton, Benny Mardones, Kraft, the Mamas and the Papas, John. The list is so long we could spend all day talking about it. He has been on numerous TV appearances, including The Tonight Show, the Grammy Awards, American Music Awards, MTV New Year's Ball, Late Show with David Letterman, top 10 singles he's recorded. He is known as the rock and roll thought leader, not just because of his prowess on the drum kit, but because of his learnings over the lifetime of being in the music business and what those learnings have transferred and translated into his life that he now pours into others in the way that he goes out and does keynote speaking and consulting and works in different things around the music business and applying them into life and relationships in both business, personally, and professionally. You can tell I'm I'm having a fanboy crush here on Cyndi, so I'm just talking too fast in my intro. I'm so excited to have him on the show and learn from his life story. So Cyndi, welcome to the Driving Change podcast. It's an honor to have you on.
Thank you very, very much. It's an honor to be here, Jeff. I appreciate it. And you summed it up in such a great way. Good night, everybody. No, I'm only kidding. Thank you for having me,
We're dropping
Jeff.
the podcast mic. It's over.
There you go. Well, I appreciate you having me and the time. And I'm excited to be here, Jeff.
And for those who are just listening and not watching, you don't see the background Cyndi has that he's on in his studio. All I see are gold and platinum records and famous names all over the wall behind him. So to live his life and to learn his lessons is going to be fun. So Cyndi, I forewarned you. The only question you got ahead of time was, our listeners have grown accustomed to learning the backstory, the origin story of our guests. And what made them who they were. Take us back to like that little Cyndi running around the streets of New York City and all the life lessons you learned as a boy, and who influenced your early days and how you ended up becoming who you are as this world-class rock and roll drummer. Tell us a little bit about that story.
The answer to that question will be about an hour and a half, but I'll try to condense it as much as possible. At 2.5 years old, I received a drum for Christmas, and I show the actual picture of me beneath the Christmas tree at 2.5 years old in my presentation on a PowerPoint slide. But I never let that drum out of my sight. I was very attracted to rhythm. My dad played big band music around the house, and he pointed out, hey, that's Buddy Rich or whatever. My older sisters played 50s music, rock and roll around the house. I was always jumping around. But I was attracted to rhythm and the sound of the drums, but I never saw actually someone play the drums until the Beatles appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, February 9th, 1964. And that was my defining moment. From that moment on, when I saw how the freshness of that material and the way the Beatles performed it, and it was the first time in America they performed. It was like a breath of fresh air in light of the fact that Kennedy was associated a few months earlier in America. But when I saw how the girls reacted, the screaming, the reaction from the females, I said, I don't know what's happening there, but I want part of that. So ever since then, I got my drum. After that TV appearance by the Beatles, I got my first drum set. About a year later, I saved my allowance, got the drum set, started playing at little barbecues and high school dances and all of that. And speaking of that very, very first drum set, the first drum beneath the Christmas tree at 2.5 years old. I'm 69, I'm 72 right now. So if you do the math, this particular drum is about 68 and a half years old. This is the actual drum that I received. And the miracle is that after all this time moving cross country and in several apartments or whatever, I still have the original drumsticks that go with
this.
Oh
my goodness.
So yeah, it's even got some of my doodles on here and some stains. And there's actually, I don't know if you can see it, but there's actually a doodle on there of a face or whatever.
That is amazing.
And I still keep it. I have it in my studio, my office upstairs. And it's a reminder of a very, very positive, life-changing event in my life. And I keep it around within view. And when I do a speaking engagement locally where I can carry it, I carry it to my speaking engagement and show it along with that photo. But so that's it. I just, after that Beatles appearance, I scotch tape a picture on my bathroom wall, my bathroom mirror, and it was a black and white picture of a drummer from a drummer's eye view of looking out at the audience. And every day I said to myself, that's going to be you. It's only a matter of time. I received that whole concept of being on a stage, a big stage with big audiences. I received that at 12 years old in my heart. And I knew it was just a matter of time. I may have to go there was a lot of twists and turns or whatever. But I solidified it in my own mind that's what I'm going to be when I grow up.
Now that's really interesting. And I'm wondering if, not many, if you think back to when you were 10, 11, 12 years old, for those listening, did you have that kind of vision in your life and that kind of commitment to a vision in your life? And did you have people around you that were supporting that? Or was this kind of like, they didn't your dad was like, you're not going to be a starving musician? Or did you really have people saying you can do anything you want to do? Because it's usually one or the other, right? You got one camp or the other.
Well, yeah, I a little backstory. You asked for a backstory. My dad was I found out from my mom later on when I became a drummer. I was 14 when I started playing drums. My dad passed away when I was 11. So, but my mother had my back. My mother never stood in my way. She used to take me to gigs before I had a driver's license, pick me up all hours of the night or whatever with my drums. But she always had my back. But I always thought, when I was 15, I got this book called The Law. You asked me where I got that concept of my thoughts and my attitudes having an effect on the events that actually happened in my life. And I realized that your thoughts and your attitude and your expectations and your visualization of a final result of a situation that hasn't happened yet, your concept of what that is. I received this book called The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill when I was like 15 years old. Thick reference book. Now they make, Cliff Notes versions of it. But in it, he says, what you could conceive in your mind, you believe in your heart, you could achieve. What you can conceive, believe. Now, my mother never said, you can do whatever you want. Don't let problems stand in the way. None of that. But she always supported me, whatever I want, what I do. So with that support, in conjunction with this concept of conceive, believe, achieve, but I always put a little PS beyond that concept with enthusiastic, positive visualization of the result that you wanted. So I constantly looked at that picture on my bathroom mirror and I dreamt about that. I visualized it before I went to sleep at night, when I got up, and I actually felt the emotion as if that actually occurred. And when you connect an emotion to a visualization, you can have a visualization and say to yourself, I could have said to myself, well, if the chips fall right, or if I get lucky, or whatever. But I didn't have a doubt. I said to myself, that is going to be you. It's only a matter of time, and there's going to be a lot of obstacles. But I always, based on that concept in that book, Napoleon Hill showed me that what you can conceive in your mind, believe in your heart, you could achieve.
I mean, that is so good. You keep it up, you're going to have to come work here. I mean, you're talking about you're getting into the neuroscience realm now because we're proving some of this stuff these days, right? That this isn't just voodoo. This is real stuff. Human energy is real.
It's not voodoo. It's very real stuff, Jeff. And you know what? I would welcome some sort of scientific background or statistics that proves that correct.
Well, so many of us, what you didn't do that I think is so important, I want everyone to hear is so many of us put like qualifiers and we put limitations on our vision and our dreams, and we put qualifiers on them. Well, I want to do this if, or I'd like to do that, but, and we start to put limitations and qualifications on there that we don't even know we're doing. And you didn't do that, whether it was just, you just had a pure belief that, hey, what you read in this book, it makes sense, and I'm going to put it into practice and see what happens because I think it's real.
Exactly right. And you know, I encourage this in my presentations, whether it's corporate or whether it's a small little Vistage meeting with 10 CEOs in it, or whether it's a conference of 800 people. I advocate getting this little, what do they call it? A Cliff Notes version of this book, and it's updated because it's got valuable information. And you know what? Visualization happens. You probably put pictures of Jimi Hendrix on your wall, being a left-handed guitar player. So it's not like, kids, I used to put pictures of Corvettes on my wall. You have a favorite thing or a favorite group or whatever, or something you aspire to do. Architects put pictures of the finished high-rise on their office wall. What they want to be as it's completed before they even break ground in it. So architects use, and various professions use visualization as a tool of success. It's very important to anticipate a positive. You can't, because if you qualify it, like you said, Jeff, and put, well, if this happens, but I got it, well, fill in the blanks, you automatically put mental roadblocks against, and you end up manifesting what you don't want to happen.
Isn't that so interesting? And what you're getting at, I've never thought about this way till you just said it, is some of us have vision boards and some of us have hope boards. They're
Correct.
Not the same.
Right.
You can have a hope board, but you're not going to get there if you have a hope board, right? You have a vision board, it's a completely different belief system.
That's correct. And in light of the fact, in my belief system had to do with playing drums with a platinum artist, or being with a Hall of Famer, or playing huge concerts or whatever. And I found out later on that online, the statistic is 5% of the musicians that pick up an instrument make a living for longer than 1 year. 5%. So wow. I've not only made a living, I made a living for over a half a century, played platinum artists, 4 of which are in the Hall of Fame, soon to be 5. Lauper will eventually get in, I predict. And played on top 10 singles, as you mentioned in the intro. And so, yeah, the odds are incredible. So how did I beat the odds? And that's the gist of my presentation, of my story, is basically using based around an acronym that I call BEATS. And in addition to playing beats on a drum set for over a half a century, I've lived these principles, and they stand for, the B is belief in a power greater than ourselves, enthusiasm, looking at a future event with enthusiastic anticipation, attitude, which is a positive attitude, and your thoughts, and having control about thoughts, whether the thoughts come in negative and positive your whole life, but choosing which thoughts you pay attention to. Tenacity is very important, realizing that problems happen in your career or problems happen in your life as learning experiences. They're not meant to press you down. They're meant to build you up. And the last but not service, and certainly not least, is service. Service to others, service leadership of yourself, commanding, well, whatever. So it stands for belief, enthusiasm, attitude, tenacity, and service. And living according to these principles, this is how basically you beat the odds in business and in life.
Boy, that is so good. I think we probably could stop the episode right now, or we could have 5 more episodes just going into each letter, right?
Well, or we can do this, Jeff. I can sit down in my office here and play you a tune or two. No, I'm kidding.
Look at that. How many of those? Oh, that's amazing. So let me ask this then, because I hope the audience stopped. If you didn't, pause and rewind and go back to those 5 principles, and you can remember them anchored right into Syndi's. He's a drummer, right? So beats, belief, enthusiasm, attitude, tenacity, and service. And you could live a life of success with just those 5 words if you embody
Absolutely.
those and learn how to do it. So take us through the journey a little bit then. You're 14, 15, you kind of know, you got the visualization, you know this is where you're going to go. You started to formulate beats without even realizing beats was going to end up ultimately being your manifesto, your principles. What happened next? Like, when did you get your first really, you're like, I think this is going to go?
Well, it happened. It speaks to the service and relationship aspect of my success. And it happened. I moved 3,000 miles away to Los Angeles from New York to get my first big break. And I'll try to make this story as short as possible. But I finally got an audition with Rod Stewart. And I said, this is my big break. This is going to happen. And I ended up, the audition was held in a studio with all the instruments provided. He was in there with his band auditioning 5 or 6 different drummers, one at a time, going in the studio. When it was my turn, I had to go. I went out and got my own drum set, which was in the car. And they said, no, there's a drum set in there. Rod is waiting for you. And I said, I was so insecure. The first time in my life I was asked to play on a drum set other than my own. I didn't want anything to go wrong. I didn't want to feel uncomfortable. So I brought my own drum set. I thought it would be okay. But it wasn't okay. I made Rod Stewart wait for, 30 minutes. So obviously I played the song Tonight's the Night really well, but obviously I didn't get the gig. I was as depressed as I ever was before or since that situation. And I had a mentor. I call picking the brain of people that have done successfully what you intend to do. I call it my brain trust. Napoleon Hill calls it a mastermind, having people that have done whatever. So one of my brain trusts, one of my mentors was Carmine Appice, who's a drummer for the Vanilla Fudge in New York. He was a rock star drummer. He lived in LA. I met him in LA. And at this point, he was the drummer for Ozzy Osbourne and Ted Nugent, whatever. I told him about the debacle about the Rod Stewart audition, and I said, hey, Carmine, I think you should go for that gig. They haven't found anybody yet. He goes, you got Rod's management's number? I gave him Rod's management's number. He goes down and gets the Rod Stewart gig. 7 albums later, he co-wrote Do You Think I'm Sexy, the song with Rod Stewart. $250,000, 1/3 of the writer's royalties of that song. So he benefited from the advice of little old Syndi, right? Now, that comes around because he said to me, I was so depressed blowing that Rod Stewart audition. He said, Syndi, send some resumes out. You could use my name. So I used his name on 50 resumes. I sent them to managers of bands that I really, really liked. One of those managers was Peter Grant, the manager of Led Zeppelin. All of Peter Grant and Led Zeppelin's mail goes to Swan Song Records, their record company in New York, run by their attorney, Steve Weiss. And all of their mail gets put in a bin, gets forwarded to England by resident. This is how the universe, this is how what I call the power greater than ourselves at work in our lives. I call it the universe, God energy, whatever you want to call it. My resume, his name is not even on it. It ends up on the attorney for Led Zeppelin's desk. Right around that time, he is putting a band together around Michael Bolton, soon to become Michael Bolton, as a band project. He's shopping his songs around to different labels. He's getting response from these labels. Hey, Steve, we want to see this band. We like the material. Steve Weiss, the attorney for Led Zeppelin, needs to find a band because he needs to showcase these songs to labels to try to get Michael a band deal. And he needs a drummer. He needs a band. So Steve Weiss, his name isn't on my resume, but he opens my resume addressed to Peter Grant. Why? What inspires him to open that resume? It's your guess as well as mine. Opens the resume. Oh, I need a drummer. He sees the LA address. He's about to throw the resume in the trash, but he turns the page and sees Carmine's name on it. He's my only reference. So of course he calls Carmine. But how does the universe engineer certain things and put certain things in your path to benefit you? Well, Steve Weiss, the attorney for Led Zeppelin, used to be the attorney for Vanilla Fudge, Carmine's first band based in New York years earlier. There's a connection there. Is that an accident? No, I don't think it's not luck. It's not accident. It's not serendipitous. It's not synchronicity. It's the God energy putting things in your path to make you successful. Steve Weiss calls Carmine. Carmine obviously vouches for me. And so Steve Weiss calls me, says, hey, do you want to fly to New York to audition for this band? We're close to a record deal. Rewind the clock a little bit. After that debacle of the Rod Stewart audition and the drum set, I became very good friends for about a 2-week period with somebody by the name of Daniels, first name Jack. So after I was in a pity party, which everybody is allowed to do when they make a serious mistake, but then you got to climb. What did you learn from that mistake? Well, I learned that I need to play on a strange drum set. So I called some rehearsal studios in LA, rented some time with my headphones and Walkman, and I became comfortable with playing on a strange drum set other than my own. Now I get the call from Steve Weiss, the attorney for Led Zeppelin, calls me in LA, and I was at the bottom. Jeff, then I was at the bottom thinking, is this all going to be worth it? You know, there's a children's story called The Good Wolf, The Battle of the Two Wolves. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's an Indian chief telling his grandson, you know, inside every human being, there's a battle going on between a good wolf, positive thoughts, bad wolf, negative thoughts. And the grandson goes, which one wins? Which wolf wins? And the grandfather says, it's the one that you feed. So again, positive, negative thoughts. The bad wolf in LA being drunk off my ass for 2 weeks, excuse the French, or for 2 weeks period, was talking really, really loud. But then I read somewhere that the negativity, the enemy talks really the loudest when he's about to leave your house. And so I rose above that. I went ahead and I said, there's a reason why I blew that audition, is to be able to play on a strange drum set. I get the call from Steve Weiss in LA, fast forward after all of this. And he says, would you want to fly to New York? And do you have any problem playing on a strange drum set? He actually asked. And I said, no. So he said, fly to New York, audition for this band. So that band with Michael Bolotin and Bruce Kulick and Jimmy Haslip was a band called Blackjack. And we were signed, we auditioned together. We auditioned for some labels, and Steve Weiss became our manager and our attorney, the attorney for Led Zeppelin. We recorded for Polydor Records, and that was my first big break. And then, but then, you know, it was my first big gig with the Hall of Fame producer by the name of Tom Dowd, produced our record at Criteria Studios, a world-renowned studio still in operation in North Miami. And I was on the top of the world. I was on a salary. I was equal member of a band. It wasn't like a sideman gig where I just was hired to do the record and paid a fee. I was the part of the band. And so that was my first big. And, you know, that was my first big break. But the takeaways there, Jeff, are Mr. Superstar drummer gets the biggest gig of his life, Carmine Appice, from the advice of a lesser known, hardly known, unknown little fledgling drummer in LA. So that compares to the opposite, where how do I get the biggest gig in my life, which I'm still reaping the benefits for, was I signed an autograph in 1981 after the Blackjack gig with another band. I signed an autograph, and he turns 2.5 years later, this gentleman that I signed an autograph for, I didn't have time. He asked me to try to get him a gig in New York City, and I went out of my way and listened to his demo and tried to get him a gig. I was a spirit of service. Mr. Rockstar Drummer spends time with a guy, a fan, and enables him try to get his first big break.
So you didn't even know this guy.
I didn't know. It was after a gig. I was in a tremendous hurry. It was a gig in New Haven, Connecticut, and everybody was out of the dressing room on the bus because we had a long overnight drive. And this gentleman was standing in the doorway with a camera and a pen. He's there to see the drummer, and I was flattered by that, obviously, because the marquee guy was the artist was already on the bus, the guy whose name was on the marquee. So he's there to see the drummer. And I always thought it was a novel idea why some people place a value on another person placing their name on a piece of paper, the idea of an autograph. And I'm going, he's there to see me. It reminded me of a story walking around the mall with my mother at 15 years old after I saw the Beatles and whatever. And she used to say, Sandy, I understand why you dress like those Led Zeppelin guys or those Rolling Stone guys, but why do you carry a pen all the time? And I said, Ma, in case anybody asked for my autograph. I was 15, walking around the mall dressed like a rock star. So that I engaged that gentleman in the doorway, Jeff. 2.5 years later, he says, you helped me out trying to get a gig. You stopped when you didn't really have the time. You engaged me, and I appreciate it. I want you to be the drummer in this for this artist that I found in Queens. This is not the fall of '83. She's going to be the biggest star in 1984. Come down in the studio. I want you to meet her. I said, Dave, I can't join a baby band and ride into Winnebago again and share rooms in a hotel. Sandy, you might have to do it at the beginning, but come down. You're not going to, I want you to be involved with this project. So I went down, and it was Cyndi Lauper when I walked in. She was working on her very first album. Nobody knew who Cyndi Lauper was. I ended up joining the band and touring with her, and that whole first album, she became a huge star in about 4 or 5 months. And during that tour, I met the woman who I'm still married to. In November of 24, it would be 40 years since the night I met her when Cyndi and I played the Charlotte Coliseum in Charlotte, North Carolina, November 23rd, 1984. And I met her, we started seeing each other, so it's a story, but she's upstairs right now. So the point of the matter is that, it's the little events, it's the little engagements. People don't care about what we did for ourselves. People care about what we did for them. People care about how we made them feel when they crossed our path. It's all about relationships. And that little 5-minute encounter changed my life personally and professionally. Now, rewind, and that was Dave. That was, I called the Dave in the doorway story. Dave ended up being Cyndi's manager, and et cetera, et cetera. So the Carmine Appice story, where he gets the biggest gig of his life, self-admitted, from a guy, a known drummer. I was his Dave in the doorway.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show you that every little engagement could turn into something. You don't do it for the agenda. You do it because it engulfs the people. It engulfs that little flame inside that I call a soul inside of everybody.
Well, and it's a matter of who you are, right? So it's an integrity. It's part of your identity. Well, I want to go back a little bit on this, and I know you've summarized this so well, but for the listeners thinking about what you just heard over the last 10 minutes, at his lowest point in his life, essentially, as depressed as he was, he still thought about giving somebody else an opportunity that they might be able to take advantage of. And you gave him that lead for Rod Stewart, even though you were at the pit.
Right.
And so when you think about, no matter how hard things feel right now, if you live a life that's an act of service, even when you just feel lousy, it's somehow, to your point, the universe, your divine intervention, wherever you want, it almost like it activates the world for you. And it says, look, this is a guy who's about other people, even when he's been kicked in the teeth. So that point of you being willing to serve, even in the most bottom part of your career, is not lost on me. The second thing that you said that I think is powerful is when you got done with your Jack Daniel's pity party, you did do a little bit of inventory and say, what can I learn from this? And you recognize that you didn't have a next set of skills that you needed, which was to be able to play on a drum kit that wasn't yours. You didn't know that was going to be the exact thing you needed to get you to the next level. You just knew that it was something that you needed to get better at. So when we think about our lives, like what right now, you might not be where you want to be. You might not have the vision. You're not sitting on a stage looking out over 10,000 people you're playing for, but you know that right now that you need to do something to get a step forward, to get a skill that's going to someday get you on that stage. What is it? You recognized it. And so many of us don't. So just take that next step. And then as I follow that story along, and that willingness to stop in the doorway and listen to a guy that you didn't even know from Adam just for 5 minutes. And then you didn't just listen. Here's what I took from that story. And you tell me where this is on or off. You didn't just stop out of the kindness of your heart, sign the guy's autograph, placate him, tap him on the head and say thank you and get on the bus. You actually, if I'm not mistaken, you actually gave him your number and told him, because he wanted to submit his demo to you, you went the next step and said, send it to me. And then you actually followed through with a guy that you didn't even know. He didn't have anything to offer you.
Nothing at all. He said, I said to him, he said, Syndy, would you help me get a gig? Because he was a bass player in Connecticut. Would you help me get a gig in New York City? I said, Dave, I can't recommend you unless I hear you play. I don't know what you're about as a bass player. So here, I'll tell you what, here's my card. And back then it was a business card with my name and my phone number on it and address. I said, here's my card. Send me a cassette of your playing so I can listen to it, and then I'll refer you to where I think it's appropriate. And he couldn't believe you're giving Syndy Gennaro is giving me his phone number and his home address. I said, Dave, it's no big deal. Just go ahead and take it. I got to go. I'm in a hurry. My road manager's yelling at me to get on the bus. So yeah, you're right. And this is just my nature. It's not because I read it in The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. This is something, a mindset, Jeff, that I was taught around the dinner table by my parents. I was very lucky to be brought up with nurturing parents about you treat everybody the same. You know, make everybody fortunate for having crossed your path. And regardless of the color, regardless of their color of their skin, you know, politics, sexual affiliation, whatever it is, how much money they have or whatever, everybody's the same because we all have that little soul inside of us. It makes all human beings basically a cliche, but we're all a member of the same family. We're all in the same plateau. Every human being on the planet.
What I also don't want to miss is in that story, there's two characters there. There's the Syndy Gennaro character who had to recognize in the moment that he's not above this guy. And you had to lower yourself down to what can I do to serve this guy in the moment? But the other character in this story, Dave also had a vision. And his vision was to be a bass player or to be in the music business full time. And he had to have the courage to go to you and make an ask.
That's right.
He didn't just ask for an autograph.
Right.
He actually asked for help.
Right.
Most people don't go that far because they don't feel like they're worthy of that ask.
Correct.
If he had never made that ask, you would have never made that offer, and you would have never been the drummer for Cyndi Lauper.
That's 100% correct. And not everybody sees that angle of it, that he had the you-know-what to come. And aside from that, a little aside was that this was like some sort. It was a high, you know. He was backstage, and I didn't see any credentials on him. I didn't see a laminated pass or a sticky pass, an after show pass. I didn't see. I don't know how he got back there, and I still don't know to this day. But he kind of had to worm his way back there somehow. Right. To see the drummer. Maybe of course the security, you know. Maybe he thought that everybody was on the bus or whatever, because everybody was on the bus except me. I was rushing around gathering my stuff because I was in a hurry. But so he had the chutzpah, whatever the word is, to go out of his way and ask for help. And yeah, you're right.
And that's that kind of law of reciprocation, I think. And if you were to go back and ask Dave in that moment, he might have even verbalized, I don't have anything to offer you today, but I might someday. Like if you have a heart of like, I'm going to make an ask of you and it's a big ask and you don't have any reason to help me and I have nothing to offer you, but I promise you if I ever do, I will. And if you had that mindset, I think, which he obviously did, or he would never called you, right?
Right. Well, it was the like the summer of '81 when we played that hot concert, and it wasn't until the late summer. It was 2 years later, '83. he found Cyndi, signed her to a management deal, and got her signed to Epic Portrait Records, and doing their first record. That was in the fall, late summer, early fall of '83.
Now, can I tell you, there's one thing about Cyndi Lauper that now that knowing that you were a drummer, that I'm a little disappointed in you on, that you didn't have a revolt and say, I can't play a song that says the drum beats out of time.
You know what? It's funny you should say that, because right there, she was always one that Cyndi was, well, you know what? I want you to play it really simple like the record. When we play live, play simple like the record. Don't. But when she sang that, it was boom, boom, boom. When she sang that line, when the drum beats out of time, I play a little. It's not what you would call a drum fill. It's just like a little. I guess by definition, it is a drum fill, but it isn't real busy.
Right.
It accents, it supports the vocal. Drum beats out, so she really liked it. She turned around and she was awesome.
Did you at least at some point play the drum out of time during rehearsal just to make a joke and say, see, this is what the song.
No. That's so anti-drummer,
Exactly.
Drummer is
exactly.
And one of the things I do in my presentation, Jeff, is to compare the role of a drummer to the role of a CEO or the role of a team leader, executive team within a company. So there are a lot of similarities, whatever. So
yeah, that's good, because bass players would argue that they're the CEO, but whatever. I'm just saying, I'm not a bass player myself, but they always have a different attitude. Like, we know the drummer's what keeps it together, but the bass players always argue that they're the ones who keep it together, right?
Well, you bring any bass player right here, right now, and I'll argue that point until doomsday, where it all comes down for the drummer. You can't have a high rise without the foundation, and the foundation is the drummer. Now, the bass player, figuratively speaking, is on the foundation and the frame of the house, because he's more with melody, but he's with the bass, he's with whatever. I can go into a musical thing that will disavow that.
I saw a bumper sticker one time, and this is right up your alley. The bumper sticker said, like every other musician in the world, you're following a drummer.
That's correct.
It was on the back of his car.
That's correct.
That's awesome. All right. Well, listen, let's go let's go now let's shift gears into application, because you've been, we could do 15 episodes just talking about stories of your life and your musical career and everything you've learned. You're now doing a lot of speaking at conferences and for companies and different events. You're involved in a lot of things. What are you the most passionate about right now, and how can people start to engage with you at a deeper level and learning about what you have to teach?
Well, what's occupying 95% of my time right now is going out of town and speaking for either corporate. I speak for this organization called the Vistage Organization, which is a peer-to-peer group where CEOs have a mastermind or a brain trust or whatever. But that's led to a lot of conferences, and we my wife and I just came back in May of 23. We went to Malaysia to speak to a really huge conference, and so right now that's my wheelhouse right now, speaking for conferences and associations, and where I'm able to bring in a drum set and I play along with a medley of hits that I've been involved with, and I have audience members come up on the drum set. So it's a very entertaining, interactive presentation, but it also has several takeaways, because I build in the BEATS acronym within the presentation, and I exhibits similarities between the Hall of Famers and their mindset and how they treat their relationship with their band and how they keep a band, and the similarities between a drummer and a CEO. So there are a lot of similar takeaways in my presentation, but I like to combine the entertainment factor too. So there's a company I'm speaking for, I think in November, no, it's in July, that they're having their company meeting, an event at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So the night before in Cleveland. So the night before I'm doing a presentation. So it ties in with the musical theme of their presentation.
Well, don't let them know about that drum you have from when you were 2. They might end up putting that in a case in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That's correct. Well, I did visit the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they asked me for my book. They want to put my book in their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame library, so I signed it for them. And I also, on the other, I won't take your time to see it, but if we had more time, and I'll be happy to do it in a private moment, Jeff. But I show you my collection of hotel keys, 2,300 plus hotel keys of every hotel except for 3 that I've ever stayed in my whole life. And
Holy cow.
yeah, it's over there sitting in a display case, in a jewelry display case.
That's amazing. Well, you mentioned also the segue was perfect for the book. So you got the book, Beat the Odds in Business and Life. That's available for folks to go out and get as well, right?
Yes. You can just go to my website, www.cindygennaro.com, and it's Genn like Nancy, ARO.
CyndiGennaro.com. So go check out Sandy's website. If you have anything coming up event-wise, I've seen lots of clips of him. I've not seen you speak live. I hope to one day. And maybe we'll even share a stage together one day.
That'll be great.
And go book Sandy, go bring him in. I mean, if you saw the BEATS acronym alone that he teaches off of will probably change the culture that you have of your people if you're listening. And hopefully you got a lot out of this episode. I know I sure did. Sandy, we might just have to have you come back on for another part 2 on this if you're open, because we just started scratching the surface.
I know. And yeah, I'd be totally willing to do that, Jeff, because you're a great conversationalist, and your questions are awesome. And I'd welcome the opportunity even to go have a beer somewhere in Nashville when you come to Nashville, on me.
Well, we might have to do both now, because I get there quite frequently. So
Good.
Really appreciate you being on. I can't wait to get the feedback from this show. I think people are going to get a lot out of it. Thanks again.
And they can also email me at sandy@cindygennaro.com, and I answer all my emails. So
that's perfect. Thank you. Very good. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
I appreciate you, Jeff. Thank you so much for the opportunity.